Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the Doing What Matters podcast. We are in the beginning episodes of kind of this next iteration of the podcast, and I'm really excited about the guests that I have with me today. But let me set it up just a little bit. As we have switched over, we're really talking about conversations of people and with people that are choosing to live from rest, not rush. And I really believe that my two guests today are doing exactly that. I've been friends with them for a long time. And so I'm just going to welcome them in. Chris and Michael, welcome to the Doing What Matters podcast. I'm really thrilled to have you here.
Thanks, Teresa. It's so good to be here. It's my pleasure, our pleasure to have a great conversation with you.
Yeah, can't wait, Teresa. Thanks for having us. This is going to be a fun conversation for sure.
This is going to be a fun one. And I know these guys really well. We've been in a mastermind together for a very long time with our mutual friend, Dan Miller. That was our first introduction to knowing each other. Both of these guys have been on the podcast. Michael has been on twice, I think, once with his wife.
Yes.
Lydia. Yes. And Chris has been on a couple of times, I believe, and also did an interview with me when I think I was at 2 years, maybe 3. I can't remember, Chris, when I asked you if you would interview me for kind of an anniversary episode. So these are familiar people to us, but the reason I wanted to have them back on for this episode is because of some of the work they're now doing. And it absolutely aligns with some of the things that I do. And I'm so excited to refer them and work with them in this. But before we dive in, just in case people are new and they haven't, listened to every archive over the last 4 years of the podcast, because we know everybody does that, right? Chris, why don't you introduce yourself just a little bit and catch up the audience on who you are?
Sure. So Chris Niemeyer, I live here with my beautiful wife of 22 years this year and 4 kiddos in Tampa, Florida area. I have been an entrepreneur for the last 17 years in different forms, have some different businesses, really pivoted hard to real estate and coaching since the pandemic. And I've been a real estate investor and business coach and have this mission that we'll get into more on this podcast, but just about leading men, investing in other men to level up, to be more intentional as a husband and father. And that's the exciting thing we're doing at the Forge. And I'll let Michael talk more about himself too. We'll get to that point later.
Michael.
Yeah.
Share with us, my friend.
22 years, Chris.
I know.
I guess I didn't realize that. Yeah. I'll be married 10 years to my beautiful wife. We live up here in Buffalo, New York, which is gorgeous this time of year. People don't realize that it stopped snowing for a little while in Buffalo. And I have 3 kids, and I'm a family man to the core. I love being with my family, and really everything I do professionally is a means to spend more time with my family and have more flexibility. So what that means for me is professionally, I'm an executive coach. I'm involved in some real estate as well, some Airbnbs, and now I'm all in on this mission that we'll talk more about with the Forge, where Chris and I are aligned on. And just really going all in with this mission of getting guys to step up and take their role as father, as husband. And I know we're going to talk a lot more about this later, but we had one of these moments, and you're probably going to ask this question, Teresa, but I was just looking around and seeing all the issues with the world, especially the last couple of years with the pandemic and people being trapped in their homes, and just some of the issues that came up and came out of all that. And we got thinking about, wow, I don't know if I like the direction that the world is going in, the direction that society is going in. What can we do about this? What can we do about this in our own homes? And then beyond that. So that's where some of these questions that led to what we're doing now started.
Well, that's a great setup to where we want to go today. So for the podcast, I know you guys super well, but I know that my listening audience does not. And I want to go back in time just a little bit, because part of the reason I wanted to redo the podcast was to really hear some of the stories of people that have made that transformational move to say, I want to do it different. I want my life to live internally from rest. And I believe rest is an internal thing. It's not a vacation. It's not a day off. It's not a weekend away with your spouse. It is really an internal place that you come from. But it takes a while to get to there and not live hair on fire. Both of you guys have made that choice. And I know we don't have time to go into all the stories, but there's been some pivotal things that have happened along the way that said, whoa, wait a second, this needs to be different. So I'd like to hear a little bit from both of you, and then we'll dive into, and what did that form in you that then formed the Forge, which is the work that you're doing in the world in a passionate way. So Chris, why don't you start us out and just talk about that transformational time? What's a time where you said, ooh, this has got to be different. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Wow. Well, interesting setup here, Teresa. You and I first met in the Caribbean on a cruise.
We did.
Because through Dan Miller, one of my companies at the time, I had two travel companies online. That was my first business, was running large group travel. So I had employees and all this stuff, right? And so one of the aspects of that was putting together these cruise groups. That's where we met. But fast forward a little bit to the pandemic. I was more the business owner at the time, not super involved on a daily basis with those companies, but I had employees that were and was dabbling in real estate a little at that time. Well, what's one business industry you probably did not want to have and own during the pandemic? It was a travel company. Try 2 travel companies. And so when about 2/3 of your income gets shut off overnight, you start to panic, and you start to look around and go, okay. And for me, through my lens of faith, it was, all right, Lord, what are you calling me into, and what can I do differently? And there's a lot of story, a lot of background, here, and I can go on for days about that. But suffice to say, it was really taking stock and taking inventory. And I remember both of you reached out and offered some questions here, because it was about late April or May of 2020 where I had to lay off all my team. I was looking at a 6-figure loss and going, how do I sort out my next steps? And I designed a pivot day retreat, I called it, where it was me and about 20 questions from people like you and others, mentors in my life that I value, that said, okay, let's take some inventory. What have I learned? What am I decent at? Where's my heart kind of calling me toward? And that's where I really sat for a day on the beach here in Clearwater Beach, and just thought through and answered questions, and really just took inventory and stock of, how do I want the next version of myself and my work and my life's work to look? And there were some practical things there. I really did want to get involved into real estate investing and did a lot more of that, but also this thing of coaching and really coming alongside men in certain areas. One aspect of that was Michael and I actually joined forces on a small scale on the side to start up a little mastermind group of guys that said, let's just do life with some men, pour into them, share some of what we've learned, help them out in different ways. And so that has started since, I think it was June of 2020, we began that. We've both been running our own businesses and things through that time, but it was end of last year where we both took a little more inventory again and said, you know what, if we wanted to be all in on this vision and reimagine this, what would that look like? And that's what led us to the Forge, and spent some time, retreated together, really imagined what that could look like. So for me, it was pivoting because of the pandemic and just the financial aspect of that, but moving toward a closer alignment of, why am I here on this earth? And what do I need to do with the talents and treasures that I've been given? And that's where Michael and I joined forces.
So Michael, I want you to hang tight for a minute, because I have a question for Chris in that. So one of the ways that I define rest is healthy relationships. So I just use each letter, right? Rest comes from healthy relationships, full circle energy, which is a tool that I love called the Enneagram, that head, heart, body connection, intentional slowing, and purposeful time. So REST, if those 4 things are kind of in alignment, it's not going to be 100%, right? But we're going to have a pretty internal restful feeling. So when you think back, I want to dive just a little bit deeper, if you don't mind me probing. And you think of, because in my own story, what I write about in my book is that my relationships weren't healthy. I didn't know how to connect that head, heart, body connection. I didn't know how to slow down. And I was pretty hair on fire with my time because it was much about how much could I get done. So when you think about that period of time when we move into the pandemic and you're doing this inventory, what for you would you say was the one that, when I just went through those, and I know it's the first time you've heard them, was the most out of alignment?
Yeah, I think for me at that time, it was time. Because, and maybe I will share a little story here, because March and April were nuts. I know it's nuts for everybody, but for me, I had 10 employees to figure out, and how do I transition them and support them? These were people that we lived life with. I mean, they held my babies in our homes. I mean, they were employees, but we were close, and so there was a lot of stress going on. And I remember conversations with Michael and a few other close friends during that time when we talked about, hey guys, we need to be completely honest with each other about how are we doing. And I was fortunate to have great friends like Michael and others in my life, because people were calling me saying, travel is probably not the right business to be in right now, right? We know you're going through a lot. And there was a literal conversation we had at one point where I just acknowledged to them, I said, guys, I'm okay, but there's a lot going on inside.
Yeah.
And if I'm frank, this is the time, if we look back at like history, like in the 1920s and 30s, Great Depression, this is the kind of situation where men are throwing themselves on a train track. This is the 08-09 crisis. These are guys throwing themselves out of a tower. And so I just said, ask me the hard questions anytime, because I want that. And I remember having a similar conversation with Alicia. I think it was the next morning. This is first week of April, 2020. And so you remember, we're all masked. We're all, if we want to go anywhere, we're in line outside. So I had to go to Home Depot and I took my little daughter, Murray, who was about 5 at the time. And so we're there, 6 feet apart in line waiting, and we're in front of Home Depot. And my mind is just going a million miles an hour, but I'm there with her. And we're passing the garden center. And she says, in her little cute voice, she says, Dad, let's stop and smell the flowers.
Oh.
And it just hit me like, wow, yeah, that's the perspective I need right now, to just slow down, to just take stock of who in my life, my family that's the most important. Employees are going to come and go, businesses, dollars, profits will come and go, but my family is what matters. And that was just a good reminder. And I thank the Lord for those times, that the trials that I had to go through to realize and remember, these are the people that matter in my life.
And as you share that story, thank you for giving us that glimpse in to what all was going on. Because as you share that story, I hear, and I hope the listeners hear, from that REST perspective, your relationships were healthy. You could go talk with your wife. You could talk with your team. You intentionally, through the lens of your daughter, were kind of like invited into slowing and just noticing the moment, right? You had the awareness to say, I need to step away. I need to check in with all of myself. I need to do this inventory. So the one thing that felt a little bit crazy was the timepiece. But I love looking at rest through this lens, because you can go, okay, I can grab that. That's just a part of this. It's not everything. These other places I can really check in with and see. So thanks for sharing that story, because I think it gets down to the nitty gritty of, so what happens? Where do I want to be? What do I want to be leaning into? And you are two of the guys that do this work all the time. And we need to see it in that everyday, ordinary life stuff so we can say, oh, this is what they were doing. So thanks so much for letting me dive. I don't push all my guests. I just want my listeners to know. But these guys will go deep with me, and it's so important. So, Michael, give us a little bit. Now I've already let the cat out of the bag, what I might come back with you, right? But give us a little bit of your story, because I know you've had some similar, just like, I'm at the wall. And how is God going to grow me and stretch me or put me through it to the other side or bring me back around or any of those things? So share with us if you would, friend.
Yeah, I think my wall happened pretty early because I had just an awful battle with anxiety and kind of low self-esteem and low opinion of myself. And so I struggled with that for several years, to the point where I was just trying to manage my energy so I could operate on a daily basis. And then shortly, or toward the end of that battle, I experienced this major tragedy, which I shared on your podcast before, where a friend passed away right in front of me. And so my ability to manage the little energy that I did have to manage like life on a daily basis just got totally wiped out, and just hit this kind of rock bottom place. And I think going through all that, I was left with this decision of, whatever I do, it better mean something. And I love the title of your podcast because it so aligns with that. Like, at that point, I wasn't going to do anything that didn't matter. I wasn't going to apply my limited energy or what was left of me to anything that was useless. I think I looked around myself, and most people seemed to be doing things that didn't really matter to them. They were kind of suffering through them. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I cannot go in that direction, and I'll do whatever it takes to figure out what really does matter to me. And that took a surprisingly long time. And it was very painful to try different things, to go in different directions that I thought, okay, maybe this is the thing, and find out that it wasn't, and then have to come back and start again. So I felt very, very lost early on in life because I didn't know what it meant to find what mattered to me. And so I think through that process, that was kind of a story was being told to me, and I was learning something about myself, that if I felt this way, how many other people felt this way too? And how can I help them navigate these kind of very uncertain waters? And so that's what got me into this coaching world, because as I was figuring this out, I could also invite other people into that conversation too, and help them along and figure out, well, what does really matter to you, and how to distill that. So that's what got me into that coaching world. And I think as I talked about briefly before, just with some of the things that came up with families and people spending a lot of time together during the pandemic, I started to see a lot of things with relationships that really scared me and really painted a picture for where this world was headed. And I saw close friends just kind of pull the plug on their marriage after decades of being together, just not being able to work it out. And these are people I looked up to that seemingly had a great relationship, had strong faith, and they're just kind of quitting on their marriages. I saw kids who I thought had great parents all of a sudden come apart completely as adults or as young adults. I thought, my goodness, like, how crucial and important is this role of father? Because that seemed to be where things fell apart, is that father was not there. He was not engaged. He was not leading, shaping, loving his kids, being committed to his wife. And so I thought, man, this is an area that this world needs some attention if we're going to make this. So then, as Chris mentioned briefly too, we were doing something, and a lot of the conversations that we were already having were around this role of father, and how do you balance everything and build a business and run a business, take care of a family, and still find time to go on dates with your wives. And so we thought, wow, this is just such an important thing to figure out. what are we going to do here? Like, are we going to let this thing just sit on the back burner, or are we going to do something about this and really make a go of it? And this whole thing with manhood and stepping up as a dad, I think I've seen it done many times before, and it didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel authentic. It felt like maybe too much bravado that was not authentic, or maybe it was too buried in Christian language or something. So it never really resonated with me the way that this was done before. And so when Chris and I started talking, and he lived this life, like I saw him for a while since we've been friends, like doing this stuff with his family. I'm like, that guy gets what I think I'm after. And so then we thought, well, let's do something that's authentic, that's real, that's like allows for guys to come to the table with who they are, what they're struggling with, and still have some big dreams while they're wanting to invest in their families. And so that's where this all started. And we just looked at each other and we're like, we're doing this. Like, we can't not do this. If we're going to make an impact on the world, it starts with fathers from our vantage point. And like, let's go all in with this and make it happen.
Love it. Well, leaning into that, thank you both for kind of sharing your journey to here, because that gives us some reflection time. It lets the audience hear, like, y'all just didn't show up yesterday and decide that, oh, this would be a great thing to do, and let's go with it. I laughed a little bit, Michael, when you were talking about like the discovery piece, right? And I talk about this a lot. I've had 42 different jobs. And so at 62 years old, to say I've done 42 different things. Now, granted, that goes back to selling Christmas cards when I was like 7, and, working at every fast food joint in college and all those things. But it's always surprising just the journey that God takes us on. And from every one of those things, we're formed and shaped into kind of who we are, and we can bring those experiences. And I got a few years on both of you, but that's the beauty, is when, as you guys have formed and shaped, you're bringing so many different life experiences to the table as to who you are and what you're bringing. And so I love that you're both still willing to sit in the mess too, and not say we have it all figured out. We were talking before we hit record of even just the age span that's in your community, and we'll come around to that. But you've got guys that are way older than you in this Forge thing. And so, but community, how God forms and shapes it, is just that. It's all of it together. It can be niche specific, let's be honest, but yet when you put this out there in the world, you saw men coming from kind of all different places. And so I think that's really cool. I want to throw something in here, just even for all of us in our faith perspective. My life verse is this Romans 12:1-2. And I love the Message version that says, take your everyday, ordinary life, your eating, sleeping, walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. And I think when I think about this community that you all are forming with the Forge, and we want to dive in to talk about a little bit here today, is that's really what you're doing with guys, is just saying, hey, we want to show up in our everyday lives. And for us, that specifically forms around, kind of these 4 pillars that you guys can share with us. And if we can just show up together in our everyday, ordinary lives, eating, sleeping, walking around life, and put that before God as an offering, what will God do with that? And so from that, let's dive into, I feel like there needs to be a big drum roll or something here. Like, let's go. Let's talk about the current reality of what you're doing that matters. And I know you've been doing this for a while, but tell us about the Forge. Who wants to dive in?
Go ahead, Michael. You want to? Oh, I'm getting pointed at. Okay. well, it's a great point that you make there, Teresa. Is that I think it resonates so strongly with men of all different ages, frankly. And Michael and I, frankly, were surprised about some of the guys getting involved. We've got men in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s in the Forge now. Because let's face it, being a husband and being a father, you still wear those roles in all those decades. the kids may have left the house, but that role has just modified. And in fact, sometimes when the kids leave the house, your marriage is something that's new, and you've got to navigate new things there. And so,
Do you want me to say an amen right there? Because Dale and I are
not too loud for
empty
Dale.
nesters, not empty nesters. Open nest is the word that I use. So
I like that.
the nest is open for exploring marriage in a different way, and even your adult kids and grandkids that I now get to be. So all of those things. Yeah, exactly. So I love the age spans that you're working with and how all men are welcome.
Yeah. And I think that's key though, because it helps guys understand that there's a community of a brotherhood here of men that want to be intentional in their families at all ages, so we can all learn from each other. There are guys that are expecting babies, and there are guys that are holding grandbabies, and just the transfer of knowledge and wisdom and accountability and resources is great. So at the Forge, we're focused on these 4 pillars, right? And this is why I think this resonates with so many men, is that we start with, in the core, yourself. It's self-leadership. It's all things self-leadership. So who am I showing up as physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, to be the best version of myself? That's where my focus needs to start. And then I can become, and that second ring is, how can I be a more engaged, intentional husband? How can I be a servant leader in my own marriage? And then as you grow into your family and the kids, the fatherhood piece there is so key. I mean, we could talk a whole nother episode about just the endemic of fatherhood and the decline there, right? So my fatherhood piece, and then you go into, let's talk about your vocation. It's a lot of business guys, a lot of entrepreneurs, but there's just some other guys in the workforce that are saying, how can I be whole in those 3 categories and then have it affect doing my business with excellence, whatever that looks like? And so imagine a community of men that are fired up about those 4 pillars, helping each other grow in all those areas. That's what we're doing at the Forge.
Yeah.
So,
and I want to say another piece
ahead,
on this too.
Yeah.
You'll notice the order here, and that's very intentional, because the way that society or the world would suggest is that the guy goes out, gets his business figured out, gets his career figured out, and then provides financially. And then he goes down the line. Okay, now that I provided financially, I'm going to make some time for my kids and invest in them. And then, if there's any time left over, maybe I'll take my wife out once in a while. And then the chances of there being anything left to take care of yourself are kind of out the window. So we're flipping this thing completely upside down and saying, you can't show up the way you need to for your marriage or for your kids if you don't start with taking care of yourself. And that's a hard thing to get your mind around sometimes for a lot of guys, because they're like, well, that seems selfish. Like, that seems selfish for me to take time away, the limited time I have with my kids and my business and my marriage, to work on myself. Are you kidding me? But we're saying, if you don't do this, you'll have nothing to give in these areas. So that's why this is pretty controversial for a lot of guys. When they first see it, they're kind of like, whoa, what do you mean my business is last here? Like, that just doesn't make sense. But when you have those areas of self-leadership, marriage, and fatherhood dialed in, and you feel like those realms are taken care of and focused on first, you can go into a business with all the fury you want, and you won't feel that guilt, like, oh, I didn't spend enough time with my wife, or I didn't spend enough time with my kids, and getting pulled back and forth, that type of thing. So it's actually freeing to be able to take care of yourself first and everything at home, so you can then go all in when you need to with your business.
Well, and you know that I am smiling ear to ear, because this is the real life process. And I always say about the real life process, it's nothing new under the sun. When we really get down to it, and, I use the visuals of the 2 triangles. So when you say flip it around, I'm like, yeah, flip it around, because that's what we're taught in our culture and society, whether you're men or women, is to, do the work piece first. Maybe you'll have some time for stuff in your real life. And then maybe, just maybe, you'll get to know yourself. But if we flip that over foundationally, and we work on that self piece, Then it flows into our life, those we love, those we care about. Then it flows into our work. God will still make time for us and allow the time for purposeful time, as I talked about living from rest. That time will be there to do the work exponentially that we're to do, but not at the cost of the other things. And so I truly believe that. That is why, I really so align, because we all align on the work that we're doing with people, and how we're introducing people to this idea of flipping it upside down and doing it. And this group, the Forge, is specifically for men that are leaning into this. And I love the kind of narrowness in some way. And that sometimes doesn't sound like a good word, although all of us have worked as coaches and we know that to narrow down to exactly what God is calling you to do, and doing that what matters piece. So let's talk a little bit. We kind of know the foundational part of what the Forge is. And I know there'll be some guys listening and probably some women listening, let's be honest, who say, hey, honey, I want to introduce you to something that I just heard about on a podcast that I think would be great for you. Let's talk about how this works. What does it look like to be a part of the Forge? Whichever one of you wants to dive in and kind of tell us something.
Yeah, so the core of being a part of the Forge is to do life together. So it's hard for us guys to have close relationships with other guys, especially when you're in the season of life where you have little kids and you're trying to make everything work. But we've recognized the power that when guys come together and do life together and they can be real with each other, there's so much strength and efficiency in that, actually, that when you make time for that, everything else tends to run smoother, and you do it from a place of strength rather than from a place of lack.
So this
so that's what
really, can I ask you, Michael? So this really is
Sure.
a part of the real self piece when you dive into this, being a part of this community. You're really
Absolutely.
investing down in that piece. Is that what I'm hearing?
You are hearing that loud and clear. Absolutely. And so what that looks like is groups of guys that have 10 guys in a group, and Chris and I lead all those groups. So we have multiple groups, but we found that number allows for everyone to contribute and have their voice heard, and also be able to share their wisdom and their voice with everything that's going on. So those mastermind groups are the key and the foundation of what we do at the Forge. That's a place where guys can get really plugged in and start to do this work in these 4 important realms together.
Awesome. So is this a weekly thing? Is this a monthly thing? What are the masterminds doing?
Yeah, it's
so
go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, yeah. So it's a bi-weekly group. So every other week we're jumping on these calls. We also have a private text thread, Facebook Messenger thread for each group. And so guys are jumping in that. And here's the cool thing, right? Is as we talk about these 4 categories, there are conversations going daily on, as examples, right? Hey guys, my kid's going through this, or he just did this. What would you do in this situation, right? Getting some wisdom from each other. Hey, I'm going to speak next week for the first time in front of a large group, and what's some like practical things I can give or offer? Guys, I feel kind of the cold shoulder right now from my wife. Like, what's going on here? Give me some perspective here. So there's all of those things happening in the group. On the off weeks, we also have a thing called the text challenge. So Wednesday morning, these guys get a challenge from us, and
Awesome.
it can be a challenge in their marriage, their business, their self-leadership or whatever. But sometimes it's a resource, and then they jump in to that thread and say, done, or here's what happened, or here's my answer, right? And it just feeds the connection, the community piece, and the relationships we're seeing from those groups in a very short amount of time has been pretty spectacular.
One of the things I love about both of you, because I've known you a while, is that you're bringing the best of lots of experiences that you've had in other communities and other places. And that's a part of, like, I never think God wastes anything, right? So both of you have been in other masterminds, and you've done coach training, and you've done business training, and you've done all these things and been in communities. And you kind of know, like, oh, these would be some of the best tools that I could bring into something that we would like to form. And so I know you've got 2 or 3 of these masterminds going at this point in time and are willing to add more. So there's not like some limit to how big this can go. I know y'all have big, huge dreams of what this will look like in the future. But I know there's some other ways too. So what are some other things besides just the mastermind level that guys can be involved in?
Yeah, we're super excited about something we call the Travel Tribe. And both of us love to travel.
Loving the name. Loving the name.
Yeah. Yeah. We had Chris and I had a couple experiences together with some close friends where we went to some pretty unusual places. And throughout that time, had just such a life-giving experience where we a couple of years ago, we went to Cuba, and it was like a little bit of an unsettling place, right? So there's no internet, everything's cash, like you're kind of off the grid while you're in Cuba. And the history there, if you've read anything about Cuba, but it was a pretty interesting trip. So as we're sitting in cafes and hanging out together and exploring Cuba together, we started having these really intentional conversations and authentic conversations where we were speaking into each other's lives. We were sharing things that were super real that we were going through at that specific time. And we thought, wow, like this is the type of vacation that I can come back and feel filled up, not like I need another vacation from. How can we recreate that with a group of guys where they can step out of their world, get away from all the noise, and just go deep together and make some really cool memories? And so that's what the Travel Tribe is all about. We're going to take a couple trips a year, one international, one domestic, and just go on adventures and make some time for these intentional conversations.
Yeah, I love it. When you open up just that space and really are purposeful to intentionally slow down, right? That's part of that rest piece. When you want to live from rest, not rush, which is all about what you guys are. Like there is a season of kind of that rhythm that gets into your life, the behaviors, the rhythms, the routines that I often talk about, and building those in through this next level of like a travel tribe. Like, okay, let's be together. Let's be super intentional to really step away so that we come back filled up, not drained out like of everything. Yeah. So super exciting for those two things. So you've heard a couple of ways that you can connect with Chris and Michael in the Forge and just how they're putting this into action. This is pretty new. When did you guys launch this out? Like we're still in the first few months of this big launch. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, we put the hard push in April. May was the launch. We filled 3 groups right away with some wait list, and we're doing another launch, open a few more groups in September. And like you mentioned, some bigger plans, some bigger visions for this. But at the core, what we found is these mastermind groups is what's going to help build this thing in a big way. And guys catch the vision of what it means and how it's impacting themselves, their marriage, their family, and their work in being involved in these close-knit groups. So we're excited for kind of what's ahead and what we believe. I mean, we're sitting out. Michael and I just shared part of last week together, just visioning together in person. We live in New York and Florida, but we had some time to just vision and dream and put together a tight creed of here's what guys in the Forge are about, and here's what we want to do in the coming years. So we're excited to just step into that and see how it unfolds.
Okay, so we've got a creed together. I think we'll probably need to hear it because I think that would be a great way to kind of wrap up. If you guys are willing to share, kind of wrap up this episode, and then we'll give some links and some ways. We could talk forever because I do feel like we so align. I'm helping people to learn to live from rest, not rush, and do that, and then help other people go out and help others, whether they're coaching or speaking or whatever, through the content that we have. But you guys are getting down into the nitty gritty of doing life with these guys. So let's hear the creed if you're willing to share.
Yeah, absolutely. But one more thing, we do have a big vision, but we also see that when a guy in his home steps up and is willing to say these 4 things and commit to them, we think that's how this world is going to change. So I imagine households all over the country where guys are stepping into this conversation saying, I'm going to stand up and do this stuff.
This is awesome.
That's what the vision in a way is, very, very small because it's just in each household. But if we can repeat that over and over again, all over this nation, that's where
it's the
lives
impact, right? It's the impact that it will make. Yeah.
So I'll kick this creed off with the first one. This is self-leadership. I lead myself with purpose. I am healthy and strong physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
And then the marriage piece. My wife is the most important person in my life, and my actions reflect this. I consistently lay down my life for her. I will date her, be emotionally present, and listen intently. I will love, honor, and protect her for the rest of my days.
Fatherhood. I'm intentional about shaping the character of my children, teaching and leading them to become exceptional adults. They know they are loved, and we regularly make memories together.
And finally, the vocation. I do my work with excellence, integrity, and honor. I use my gifts and talents to make an impact, serve others, and create financial abundance. This provides us the opportunity to live out an extraordinary vision for our family.
Such powerful words, guys. Thank you for just sharing that. That right there gives everyone listening a taste of really the impact that this community of the Forge is going to have in the world and in all 4 of those areas. And yeah, I am just so excited to know both of you guys, to say I knew this at the beginning, and more than anything though, to be able to share this out and say, connect with these guys. If you're a woman who's listening and you would like for your husband to show up in these ways, check this out. We're recording this the day after Father's Day. Maybe this is the Father's Day gift that you want to share with them, that you didn't get him anything, and this is the gift of the connection to the men that are a part of this Forge. Or if you're a guy listening and you're looking for deeper, these are the guys that I would highly recommend, and say, hey, get involved with one of these masterminds and one of these things. But before we wrap up, I have one more question, because this is kind of the new question that I'm asking. So I'm going to ask it to both of you just really quickly, because I love the practical of life. Like, how does this live out? So if you were to give me one way that you've practically chosen in the last 48 hours to live from rest, not rush, what's just a quick example of that? I know it aligns with what you're already doing as fathers, as husbands, all these things. But in the last 48 hours, how have you made a practical choice to say, nope, I'm going to live from rest, not from rush? Chris, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that we just came off of Father's Day yesterday. So I, my world, my business, everything kind of revolves around my phone, right? And just the way I connect with people, and even in the Forge community. But we went to church and read my Bible there. I take notes. I save stuff, in the cloud, whatever. But when I came home, that phone went in my drawer by my bedstand for the next about 7 hours, and just to spend time with the kids and spend time with family. And believe me, I do not get this right all the time. I am the death scroll and all that stuff. Like, that happens still. I'm guilty of that at times. But it was just a joy yesterday. And we had a crazy week as a family. We were all kind of scattered in different directions. So kids at camp and leadership summits and vacations. So to come back and have just some great quality time together, and played in the pool, played soccer, talked on the couch, read books together, just to have some space to rest and reflect and catch up with each of them was pretty special.
Yeah, that rest piece is huge. I talk about it in the last component of my process, rest, renew, review, and that Sabbath practice of just stepping away. And one of the biggest things is the technology piece. That's an everyday practical thing of like, put it in airplane mode, whatever you got to do, turn it off. No screen time for a period of time. And again, going back to what you said about even showing your kids that that is possible and that, you know, dad was fully present, mom was fully present. Like, what a gift. So Michael, I'm throwing it your way, friend. What's the live from rest, not rush practical moment for you?
Yeah. Yeah, there's two and they're kind of connected. But one thing that my wife Lydia and I have committed to is we start every day with coffee and reading the Bible and talking. And sometimes that only lasts 5 minutes because of everything going on in the house. And sometimes it's longer. Sometimes it's 45 minutes to an hour. But that's something that our kids know about. We're going to drink coffee. We're going to sit there. We're going to read. We're going to talk about the day. And that has just helped us honor each other in the busyness of life. And the other thing in this season that I'm really enjoying, and it's bringing me rest, is I take my shoes off. I walk out into the backyard and walk through my garden and check everything. Actually, Lydia makes fun of me. She's like, "Oh yeah, the tomatoes grew another inch today." I'm like, "Yep." But I walk around my garden and it brings me joy, and I'll pick a weed and pick a couple strawberries and bring them back. And I'm just like, okay, things slow down for a minute. I'm good.
That's the grounding, right? I mean, our good friend, Dr. Phil would say, take your shoes off and get your feet on the ground. So I love it. And I love that you have a garden. I mean, you know, the farmer girl in me loves the garden piece. So that's awesome.
And
so
God is my witness. I was there this week and we did that together. 2 mornings.
Two guys walking around the garden,
picking weeds and popping strawberries. It was
that's
great.
Right. So I don't even want to know what your feet look like. Like, I can't even go there. I know what mine look like after I walked in my garden. So, so there you go. Well, guys, it has been so good to be with you. I love the work that you're doing, but we have to know, so we can put it in the show notes and all the places and all the links. Where's the best starting point for people to connect with you? Where's the best place?
Yeah, the forgealliance.com is our website, theforgealliance.com. And you can find us. We already have a very active Facebook group too. So you can go to Facebook and find us at The Forge there. Okay.
So The Forge on Facebook, theforgealliance.com. We'll have those links in the show notes. Guys, thanks so much for even kicking off. This is a Monday morning, bright and early. Well, maybe not bright and early, but a Monday morning that we're kicking off today. This has definitely been an extraordinary moment for me. And, you know, I always close out the podcast with that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for them. But I love how you guys are really teaching people, guiding people, facilitating people to lean into those everyday moments that God is giving them as the husbands and fathers that they are. So thank you for the work that you are currently doing and you will do in the future. I have no doubt. Thanks for being on the podcast today, guys.
So appreciate you, friend. Thank you for what you're doing too. And just consistently pouring into us and investing in us. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Teresa. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, well, that wraps up this episode. We will see you next week for another episode of Doing What Matters podcast. Have a great week, everyone.